Jesus said to the Pharisees, "There was a rich man who dressed in purple garments and fine linen and dined sumptuously each day. And lying at his door was a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who would gladly have eaten his fill of the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. Dogs even used to come and lick his sores. When the poor man died, he was carried away by angels to the bosom of Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried, and from the netherworld, where he was in torment, he raised his eyes and saw Abraham far off, and Lazarus at his side. And he cried out, 'Father Abraham, have pity on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am suffering torment in these flames.' Abraham replied, 'My child, remember that you received what was good during your lifetime, while Lazarus likewise received what was bad. But now he is comforted here, whereas you are tormented. Moreover, between us and you a great chasm is established to prevent anyone from crossing who might wish to go, from our side to yours or from your side to ours.' He then said, 'Then I beg you, Father, send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they too come to this place of torment.' But Abraham replied, 'They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them.' He said, 'Oh no, Father Abraham. But if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent.' Then Abraham said, 'If they will not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded if someone should rise from the dead.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Our gospel passage today became concrete in my life because of an experience I had this past Friday. I was with some friends and we were visiting downtown Baltimore for the day. And as we were about ready to get in the car and drive home, we noticed that there was a man who was begging next to the road. And we thought that he looked like he was homeless or at least was in a desperate situation. So we went up and talked to him. A friend of mine kind of initiated this. And he went up and asked, Sir, would you like to get some ice cream with us? There was a Baskin-Robbins right there. And he shook his head no. So we went in. We were getting our ice cream, and sure enough, about a couple minutes later, he came in and said, "Hey, I'll take you up on that ice cream." So we said, "All right." So, we got him some ice cream and sat down and started talking. His name was Rob. And we started asking him, "What's your story? Where are you from?" Kind of getting to know him. Before he left, he wanted to say something else, and so he looked at us and said, "How about one for the road?" So he got 2 ice creams out of it. It was good. But it was a great experience. It was a reminder to me, because my temptation when I first saw him was to just kind of, walk by, say hello, and move on. But my friend was able to invite him into this relationship, even just for a couple minutes, to invite him into this time together. And to really treat him as a person, to treat him as someone who matters. And I learned something. Rob taught me something. He was so open, he was so eager to talk and get to know us, completely unashamed, asking for a second ice cream. And I learned from him that we're really not that different, in that I need to be more like him with my relationship with God. Because in the end, I'm the beggar, and I'm the one who needs God above everything else in my life. That's our vocation as Christians. This parable today can be frustrating. There's all kinds of things going on, and at the superficial level, if we just look at it very, very quickly, it looks like Jesus is saying that poor people go to heaven and rich people go to hell. But this is not satisfactory. After all, we have the church's teaching that we can use our wealth and our worldly goods for the glory of God. So what's really going on? How do we reconcile all of this together? Let's take a closer look. We have two figures in the gospel, in this parable. We have the rich man and we have Lazarus. The rich man dresses in fine linen and purple. He dresses like a king, someone with power, someone who has influence. He dines sumptuously every day. The everyday thing right here is really important because that means he also dined on the Sabbath, which was forbidden by the Jewish law. So this man did not observe the Sabbath, breaking one of the fundamental commands of God. So when he goes to Abraham later and he says, "Father Abraham," he's trying to make himself into Abraham's son because he's Jewish. But what he fails to realize is that he has not been living like a son of Abraham. He has not been following the ways of God. In fact, his riches and all of his power and influence has compromised his relationship with the Almighty Father. Then we have Lazarus. Lazarus, on the other hand, is a beggar, but not an ordinary beggar. There's something different about him. He has nothing to claim as his own. The scriptures say that the dogs even used to come and lick his sores. This is not, if you look at the original Greek, the sense here is not that this is a bad thing, but that the dogs, these animals, they care for him because they see that there's something good in Lazarus. Many of the saints throughout history have had similar experiences. St. Francis, some of the Desert Fathers, they had a close connection with nature, with the natural world, because of their holiness. It was like creation welcomed them. Lazarus is no ordinary beggar. We see this most of all in his silence. Lazarus doesn't say anything in this parable. And even at that moment when he's next to Abraham and looking down on this man who treated him so terribly, when most of us, I would think, including myself, would want to judge this person for what he did, Lazarus is silent. He is silent because he knows where his treasure lies. And he is with the one that he loves, his father Abraham, and with the Lord. Abraham is the one who gives the condemnation. He says to the rich man, "My child, remember that you received what was good in your lifetime, while Lazarus received what was bad." Here's the problem. It's not that the man was rich. It was that he used his riches poorly. He used what was given to him only for himself. With this in mind, there is another striking detail we cannot ignore, and that is that the main character, Lazarus, has a name. This is the only character in any of Jesus' parables that has a name, Lazarus. In Hebrew, this name means the one whom God helps. This is interesting because if you look at it, it doesn't look like God helps him very much. Lazarus really is worse off than Job in the Old Testament. Job, who you'll remember, lost everything. God took everything away from him for a time. But before he died, he restored it back to him. He gave him back at least most of what he had lost. But Lazarus dies in abject poverty. What's going on? God helps him. He helps him in a different way, though. This silent, simple man has a name because he is the protagonist. He's the one that gets it. Because he realizes that everything he has comes from God. He realizes that he needs God for his help. Father Luigi Giussani, one of my favorite authors, he says it best. He says, "The beggar is the protagonist of history, God who begs for man's heart, and man's heart that begs for God." We are all beggars before God, and Lazarus realizes this. He is helped by God because he has no one else. He puts nothing between him and the Father, and he accepts his situation as a gift and not as something to be resentful for. His heart is honest, open, and real, a place where God's love can find a dwelling place. The alternative to this way, though, is the rich man. His MO, his way of looking at life is power and autonomy. Much like the prodigal son a few weeks ago in our gospel, He craves his own self-preservation, his own selfishness. He doesn't need God's help in his mind. The rich man, he gets what he wants when he wants it. He helps himself, and he obtains everything through power and influence. All of this blinds him, keeps him from seeing the reality that everything he has is a gift and that his vocation is to help Lazarus. His vocation is to help him. There's no room for God in this man's conception of life or the law or the Sabbath. He is the poor one. But now for us, it's important to look at how we can, where do we find distractions in our own life? Where do we keep from seeing things clearly, from seeing ourselves as the beggar? Eusebius, one of the early church fathers, writing in the 4th century, comments on this passage. He says this: "A great struggle befalls men in their ascent to heaven, for that men clothed with mortal flesh should be able to subdue pleasure and every unlawful appetite, desiring to imitate the life of the angels, must be compassed with violence." Violence, not to others, but to our own sinful will. This is the path to perfection. The one who truly sees himself as a beggar before God is on the path to perfection, but our desire for our autonomy and power prevents us from walking on that path. What we need, my friends, is purification. We need to be purified from what holds us back, from what blinds us, the riches that keep us from seeing clearly that we are in need of God, and to see others who are in need. There's something in particular that I want to focus on briefly, perhaps the main distraction in all of our lives, and that is technology. If we don't see the effects of technology in our society, in our personal lives, then we need to wake up. Technology has changed everything. A philosopher once said it very, very well. He said, "Technology is the ontology of modernity." In other words, technology has changed the entire way that we live our lives, the way that we view reality, the way we interact with others, the way we see God, the way we see ourselves. Everything is different. And yes, there are so many great advances in medical science and in other areas that have made life better and healthier and good for everyone. But there are other things that have really brought us down, that have kept us from living to our full potential. Technology has brought evil into our homes. It has become the corrupt teacher of our children. It has destroyed our ability to communicate in normal human relationships. And I'm not here to condemn anyone. Obviously, we all use technology. I'm not saying we all need to go and turn our yards into a fence with goats and chickens. But it is so important for us to evaluate how we use it. Social media, texting, video games, mindless videos on the internet, all of this can prevent us from seeing clearly and being needful and being in need, dependent on God. And in particular, I turn to the parents and I ask you, do you spend more time looking at a screen than you do face-to-face with your kids? Have you allowed video games and the media to be the primary teacher and mentor in your children's lives? And if so, now is the time to begin again. I'm sure that many of you have already seen this and have tried to hinder the use of technology in your homes, and I tell you to keep doing it. I challenge you to keep doing it. It's so important, and it's a battle that's worth fighting. This is not, again, not a tirade or a lecture, but an exhortation to live the Christian life more fully. We all need this. Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. This is how we begin. So I encourage you to try fasting from technology for a little while. Maybe pick one thing, TV or internet, and try as a family to take a little time away and see what happens. We are all beggars in need of God's love, and we need to recognize this before we can see the beggars in our lives. Through a life of purification, we can hope to become Lazarus, the one whom God helps.